Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and normally I'd be in Denver this week for the OR trade show, but I pulled the plug on this event that was once looked at as a must-attend institution in the outdoor industry. Why I'm staying home has nothing to do with the crazy cost of travel these days. It's because, like all the institutions I grew up worshiping in snow, OR has lost its way. I went last winter and last summer, and for me, and almost everyone I spoke with, it was a huge waste of time and money. Folks will try and blame the pandemic, but I blame the show for not listening to what their customers want. I really hope they figure something out, because trade shows were rad community-building events, but not today's OR. It's currently a shell of what it once was. Another thing that is fucked at this point is print. Yeah, there is a print revival going on, and it's awesome, with Mike Rogie at Mountain Gazette and Pat Bridges at Slush and Todd over at Bomb Snow. They're all doing cool things on a small boutique level. But it looks like the days of monthly affordable print are now a thing of the past. While we all remember Powder, Snowboarder, and Transworld, they each died a slow death. And I think to myself, what happened to these once proud titles? And I find myself looking at the combo of Outside Magazine and I believe a group of venture capitalists looking to make a huge play to almost monopolize outdoor print. And the Outside group, when they weren't trying to block writers from starting a union to protect their exploitation by their own company, they were busy putting together secret plans to build an outside verse, or whatever they're calling it. In the beginning, for skiers, things looked promising. They hired a bunch of people from the Powder Magazine staff back to do something similar at Ski Magazine. While that's a cool plan on paper, that magazine didn't seem to know their customers either. It was like Powder all over again. And I can't speak for all the other print titles they bought and killed, but this is no surprise to me. I mean, this is a group that was like, hey, let's have zero imagination and copy every other industry with a monthly subscription model. But they did it way too late. And while that wasn't working, they saw the whole NFT craze happening. And they decided to wait a while on that one, and then they want to jump in that game late too. The funny thing is, they decided to jump in when their core supporters were calling this a scam or a money grab or something they wanted no part of. Why don't people listen to their customers? So after all their half-assed and underthought digital attempts they've made, the whole Outerverse looks done to me. A ton of people are now laid off, and it's all because the company didn't know and understand their customer base. So it means that us skiers, we're only going to get one issue of Ski, and I'm going to guess it's going to be a buyer's guide so they can still generate some ad dollars. But really, who advertises in a once-a-year magazine that has zero evergreen content? If I applied their strategy to building and growing my podcast, my plan would have to be to focus less on the actual podcast and more on me doing something like creating a magazine. If I did that, my podcast would suffer. Really, I would never do that because I know my fucking audience. There are a lot of smart people working at the trade shows and at the magazines, and I can't figure out how they keep blowing it so bad. That said, I do offer consulting services, but if you don't think I'm your fit, well, my guest this week is a master of brand marketing and being stoked and a rad human, and I'm sure he could help you out as well. Gabe Schroder, aka Super G, is a rapper you may have heard of in the late 90s and early 2000s, and his rhymes were focused all around skiing. He's also known as Schroder the Motor, and he gets so much shit done. Gabe has done amazing things at Powder Magazine, Smith Optics, and Dakine, among others. He's always the most stoked person in the room, and when it comes to the mountain, that stoke is infectious. He's the team manager that's not only motivated by his athletes, but he's out there motivating his athletes right back, and our conversation is a fun one. Before we get into it, I need to thank Mixi again. They were so stoked on me calling them out last week in the podcast intro that they want to offer you a deal on their hydration pack. And if you missed last week's intro, the Mixi pack has 2 separate bladders and a hydration dial that allows you to drink water from one side or electrolytes from the other side, or you can mix them together with a twist of a hydration dial. If you're in the market for a new hydration system, head on over to mxxyoutdoor.com. If you buy something there, enter the code POW20, that's all caps and the numbers 20 with no spaces, and you'll get 20% off your order. But they aren't even a sponsor of the show. They got a lot for just sending me a cool product. You're welcome, Mixi. The brands I really want you to support are the ones who bring you this show. They make the best products on the market, and they understand that supporting important properties like this one is important to the history of the sports. And I want you to support Elon Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Stanley, Rollerblade, Hest, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk with Gabe Schroder. One of the most stoked people in both snow and the dirt business. And I feel like nothing tells that story more than your alter ego, the rapper who flows like Rakim. I'm talking about Super G. Can you describe the inspiration and how your ski-focused CD came to be?
Yeah, for sure. I was living in Vail in the late 90s, skiing every day in the winter. And I had a different job every summer because, I don't know, I guess that's what ski bums do, or at least that's what I did. I was just always trying to make it to the next winter. But one summer I had a job driving a truck from Vail to Aspen delivering water, and the truck didn't have a radio. So I just think about skiing all day, every day, all summer. And by the time August rolled around, I guess I got tired of just like thinking about it. So I just started like rapping to myself, and I just like come up with a couple of verses and stack them onto each other. And then I'd be having some beers with my friends on a Friday night, and I'd be like, "Hey dudes, check this out." And I'd like spit out like 3 lines, and they'd start laughing, but then they'd be like, "That was pretty sweet, dude." And I don't know, I just rinse and repeat every day for the rest of the summer and fall. And then, yeah, I kind of just had all these rhymes in my head. But the funny part was I went to the Sixth Sense premiere, the Matchstick movie back in the late 90s. They came to Vail, and we're sitting around the bar and we're getting ready for the show and everybody's stoked. And then I look over on stage and there's Seth Morrison, and he's trying to raffle off a pair of skis, and nobody's listening to him because they're all around the bar. And you know, Seth, like, he didn't want to be up there in the first place. And I was just sitting there like flabbergasted. I was like, oh my God, there's Seth Morrison trying to give away a pair of skis and nobody's even listening to him. And right then I was like, Super G needs to step in and save the day. And I got real nervous, and I just finished my beer, and my heart was beating. And I just walked up to Seth and I was like, "Seth, give me the mic." And he had actually known me from a wedding that we were both at earlier that summer where I was thrown down, and it was at the Irwin Lodge. So if anybody's been there, they know what kind of vibe that produces. And we were all just having one. And anyway, he'd seen my work before. So he's like, "Okay, everybody, we're going to give it over to Gabe here." And it was really awkward. And I like get up on stage and there's like no music, nobody's listening. And I like look down at my feet and I just start like spitting out every verse I had. And when I look up, like the whole entire party was in front of the staging area, and everybody was just like staring at me. And I ran out of lyrics, and right then I was just like, "Start the movie." And then the matchstick flamed up on the screen and everyone got all fired up, and that was that. And then after the show, Murray Weiss was up there, and he's like, "Hey man, that was really sweet. We want to record that and put you in our next movie." And I was like, what the fuck? I'm like just some ski bum in Vail that like looks up to this whole scene so much. And that was I was off and running from there, it seemed.
Is there any way that you can drop a couple bars from Super G back in the day? Do you remember anything?
Oh, back in the day, like, let's see, something like, "I was born and raised in Colorado. I give thanks and praise every time it's snowing like an avalanche. I let my lyrics just flow. On your marks, get ready. Are you set? Let's go." I mean, something like that. I don't know. That was, I think, one of the first verses that I ever came up with. And then I stacked them all on from there.
No, it is perfect, and I think everybody should try to find the music on the internet. I think it'd be pretty tough. You sent me a disc, and I've got it in my CD player in my car, and the CD I had in before that sat for about 3 years in the car, so whenever I listen to a CD for the next 3 or 4 years, it's going to be Super G, which is going to be pretty incredible. But when a dude is as passionate about skiing as you are, I really want to think that your parents were all about skiing and they wanted to get you into it really young, but that's not the case for you. Your parents put you on a train at like 6 years old and sent you up to the mountains. Is that how you got into it?
Exactly. My mom and dad, they moved out to Denver in the late 60s from Iowa and Illinois. And they'd go out to these parties, you know, before they had kids. And everybody be talking about skiing and that Rocky Mountain High and all of this vibe. And so they were just kind of like, well, maybe if we have kids, we can get them involved in skiing. And there was the opportunity with the ski train that went from Denver to literally right to the chairlift at Winter Park. And we lived right near downtown. So yeah, my mom would just drop me and my bro off at the ski train. And it was great back then. It was this like Skid Row, you know, it wasn't all fancy like it is now. So yeah, we'd hop on that train, and that whole scene on the train was a whole nother story. It was wild, like kids partying their brains out, but there was no drugs or alcohol. It was all just like Mountain Dew and candy bars and like everyone going bananas.
That's wild. And you have kids. If you were living in Denver with your kids, would you ever send them to the mountain on a train like that, like your parents did for you?
Yeah, probably. It's a fun experience. It's good for me and my bro to be alone and like navigate that whole scene and make sure we got back on the train at the end of the day so we weren't stuck in the mountains. But I'd probably want to just take him skiing and ski with him myself too.
Yeah. But your parents really weren't skiers, so is it pretty much one day a weekend that you were able to go up with your brother?
Yeah, exactly. Me and my bro, I'd ski every Saturday from the first week of January until middle of March. And then that's when the Eskimo ski club that went through the train would shut down. So yeah, I got 10 or 12 days in a season from the time I was in the first grade until we got our driver's licenses. And then we were getting $150 or $200 student passes to Vail and skiing with a great crew up there all through high school.
So you get bit by the ski bug, but it's not a big ski family. So by the time you're in high school and you get your license, you can drive up there. But really, in high school, you find girls and rich girls with places in Vail. Does every weekend in the winter become going to the mountains with the girls and staying at their places and shredding?
Yeah, man, it was kind of crazy. Like, there was this great crew of girls from our neighborhood. They were all like super fun to hang with, and they were ripping skiers. They were like some of the best skiers in the school. And me and my buddy Hardy, we were kind of like the other people super stoked into skiing. And there was a few others for sure. But for a while, it just seemed like me and Hardy and these four girls were up there staying in either one of their cabins, condos, or houses. And like, we would just have so much fun. It was like, and we kind of realized it too back then. We'd be like, you know what? Life doesn't get any better than this. And we would just stay up partying all night and be the first thing out on the hill skiing all day and just having a good time. Let me tell you, those are the days.
Yeah, that was a totally different day in Vail when you could buy a season's pass. You can walk right up to the Vistabahn and get right on. The Vistabahn doesn't exist anymore, and while you can still buy a season's pass, it's a totally different experience. If you go to Vail during the peak season, you could be waiting at the bottom of the covered bridge to get on a lift almost. It's crazy. And when I think about corporate skiing, now who cares what I think about corporate skiing? What do you think about corporate skiing and what's happening with the resorts these days with the lines and the traffic and the experience being lessened?
Well, geez, man. I mean, it's tough. I think so many people love skiing and like we're all doing our part to turn people on to skiing and like it's kind of snowballed from there. But I don't really know much about the corporate experience personally, living here in Sun Valley. It's very different from that and it's awesome. And I don't know. I guess the best way to answer that is I'm glad that's not how it is at my home hill right now.
Okay. And one thing I've talked about on other podcasts is the ski and snowboard rivalry on the East Coast and the West Coast, but I haven't really talked about it in Colorado. And when you're a senior in high school, what do things look like between ski and snowboard during the early 90s?
Oh man, it was fine. It even went back to the 80s for me, like my buddy's brother, Bruner's brother, he was always snowboarding like in the 80s and we were like, oh, check that out, that's so cool. And like we always thought snowboarding was like the coolest thing, but like never once did we ever consider trying it because like we were skiers and we love skiing. So I don't know, I always was stoked on all of it, and I can't really think of anybody that I really ever hung out with that had a problem with it. So yeah, I didn't really care. They definitely motivated me. Like when I'd be on the hill and I'd see like a pack of snowboarders sitting around, I loved just spraying them or flashing past them or like jumping over them or like showing them like, hey, look, man, this is how I get down. And like, you guys may have all of the momentum and the energy and the hype, but like skiing's still where it's at. And this is, when I'm still on like a pair of 207s and skinny skis and just giving her. So I don't know. I was always stoked on the whole snowboard vibe and what it brought.
And when it's time for college for you, you end up going to Whitman College, and that seems to be a really expensive school in the middle of nowhere. How did you end up at Whitman?
Man, I don't know. I applied to only 3 colleges, Lewis and Clark in Oregon, University of Puget Sound, and then Whitman. For some reason, I was just like going to use college as a stepping stone to see another part of the world. And I'd always been fascinated by the Northwest. And I went out and visited those 3 schools and ended up at Whitman. So yeah, it was great. It was a bit small, but as I look back on things, I wouldn't have really wanted it any different. I don't know. I had such a good time there and met such amazing people that it was all good.
Were you able to ski a lot when you were in college?
At Whitman, I didn't ski too much. I would like take the ski class where you'd be like take a bus up every Thursday, to get a PE credit up to Bluewood, I think it was called, and that was all right. But really what I'd do is I'd get that Vail pass again and go hang out at my buddy's house. Like I'd have a week off for Thanksgiving, 4 weeks for Christmas, and 2 for spring break. And I literally would spend the whole time over at Hardy's place, crashing on his floor. And I'd get like 40 days of skiing in at Vail each season through college, even though I was living in Walla Walla.
That's pretty rad. And when you say Hardy, he's come up a few times. Are you talking about Hardy Nickerson?
No, Hardy Bodenheimer, my old buddy from high school and my right-hand man in all of my early adventures. He's a ripping skier, and me and him, man, we were just partners. Like he moved to Vail right after high school, and then I moved up there right after college, and we were just bros. He taught me how to kayak, and then we were just ski machines and loved getting into all of the good stuff.
Okay, so when you graduate, you did exactly what I did. You moved to Vail, and we were there at the same time. Where did you work and live?
I lived in a few different places. East Vail for a year. I lived in West Vail for a year or two. Had sleeping in a closet in Matterhorn, I think it was, when I first got there. I got a job at the King's Club, which was this fancy piano bar in the 5-star Sonanalp Hotel.
Okay.
And I had to wear this little wool vest, and I was like, screw this, man. For my name tag, I'm going to go by Gabriel here. It's like
yeah.
International clientele. And I was like, played the part, and all my friends clowned me for that job every day. But then I'd be like, you suckers, man. Like, they were all working in ski shops, and like talking to ski reps and all of this. But I'd be like, dudes, I work from like 4 to 11. I make like $200 a night. I never miss skiing. I can either get a good night's sleep or I can go out and party. Like, this job seems just right to me. And meanwhile, they're like, oh, I got to work in the shop this morning. And it's like, one of Vail's rare powder days. So I felt like I had it all figured out back then. I was stoked. And then, of course, that job would end in the spring, and then I'd have to figure something out, landscaping or water truck guy or whatever it was.
And this is a Vail what wasn't too expensive. Like, anybody could graduate college, go to Vail, get a place and live there, and it's not too expensive to live. It's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
And it was really, really fun back then. What was the best show you saw at Garton's?
Oh, Burning Spear, man. They'd light that place on fire. That was my favorite show there for sure. It still is.
Can you explain that place to someone who's never been there? Because it seemed like the dance floor had like 2 feet of play, and you had to tie down all the glasses behind the bar, and it didn't feel structurally safe, but it was super fun.
Yeah, it was an old parking garage, so it was supposed to move, right? And when people would get that dance floor going, you could feel it. It was bouncing up and down this old wooden dance floor. It was awesome.
Yeah, when I blew my knee out, I couldn't go see shows at Garton's because I couldn't stand on the dance floor just because my knee couldn't take it.
Damn.
Yeah. So another thing in Vail that happened was the second Tuesday in April. Do you remember what that was?
Oh, the BB&B, yeah.
That was like the most amazing Tuesday I think I've ever had in my life whenever I was there in Vail for it. What do you remember about BB&B?
Just standard. You head up on the hill with a backpack full of beer and a pocket full of mushrooms and whatever else, and you just hop into the same vibe that 1,000 other idiots are doing. And I was always like bummed when the snowballs started flying. It seemed that was inevitable at some point, but it's just so fun, when you have those parties at the end of the year and you're standing on the mountain and you're like still strong and you don't have a blown knee or whatever. It's just like such a feeling of accomplishment. And I always love celebrating that feeling every year. It's like something I look forward to.
Yeah. And the thing about our time in Vail, it was timed out perfectly for what was happening in skiing because that was the start of the U.S. Open. Were you at those events?
I would go to them sometimes, but I was working. The other job I had was I would drive the horse carriages in Vail.
Okay.
So I remember one time I'm like sitting there parked on the corner with this big ass Belgian draft horse, and it has this poo bag behind it, so you're not shitting in the streets. And all of these athletes, everybody's coming by, and all of a sudden here comes McConkey. And I was like, holy shit, that's Shane McConkey. And I'd was like so stoked to see him. And he just walks up to me and he's like, looks at me, and then he looks at the poo bag and he goes, is that poo? And he's all excited. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, rad. And he's just like looking at it and like admiring it. And it just, he always had this fascination with that, which was always hilarious. But that was certainly true the first time I met him.
Who else in Vail did you meet during your working days and riding a horse days that you worked with later on in the industry?
Well, Strokes was there, and he's with Oakley, Greg Strokes. I didn't hang with him too much, but who else was there? Like Hardy, he's now the head skis rep for Colorado. And then our other buddy Coop, he's the main product manager for head for North America. And there's probably a bunch of other, Bo Bridges was there. I remember him. And probably a bunch of others I'm forgetting right now that were living there out of that time. It seems like there was quite a few of us that came from the bottom of some of those clubs and found our way in the industry somehow.
Yeah, it's amazing that there was a lot of talent that just ended up in Vail and is now behind a desk somewhere in the industry making things happen. But you weren't in Vail just to shred. You had dreams of being a sponsored skier, and you were going to test those waters at the U.S. Extremes in Crested Butte in 1999. Do you and a crew just road trip down there and plan on sending it and making a career out of skiing?
Yeah, well, honestly, I never had dreams of being a sponsored skier, but once I got to Vail and like started getting rad at Vail, I thought I was like rad. And then I'm like watching the ski movies and I'm like, oh yeah, I can jump a cliff and stomp it. And this is like kind of before all of the crazy trick shit started happening. So anyway, and I'm like looking at the magazines and I'm like, I could do that. I could do that. And so I'm thinking like, maybe I can get sponsored. I didn't really ever think I'd be like skiing for a ski movie or anything, but I was like, yeah, man, I'm going to go down there and see how I stack up. And I just drove down solo and I had my brand new Rossignol triple X's that I had just gotten. And I was so stoked and I like hadn't even put in a day on them. And I go do the inspection run on the head wall and it's just like my line, like all the good ones are littered with pepper in it. And I'm like, fuck, if I want to ski this the way I want to, I'm going to have to ski through these rocks, but I don't want to bust up my brand new skis. So I get my line dialed and I go into the rental shop down below and there's this girl, Susan Medville, I think was her name, her last name. And she was working there and I walk in there and I'm like, wait a minute, if I pretend like I'm a competitor, they're not going to rent me these skis. So I'm like, walk in there and I like tuck my shirt into my jeans and jack my pants up. And I'm like, hey y'all, I'm looking to rent some skis. Y'all got them there fat skis? And I'm like, y'all got them like real beefy bindings and all of this shit. And like, she's just kind of chuckling. And sure enough, she rents me these skis. They were a pair of Volant, like half semi-chub or whatever they were called. And I like ski my line, I stomp my air, and I'm like speeding down into the finish. And there's all these moguls, and all of a sudden I mystery release because they're marker demo track bindings. And I just start ragdolling and I go to pick my ski up and it's broken in half. And anyway, I ski down, whatever. I get like second to last. At least I did not finish. But I go return the skis and I made sure I got the insurance on them, beforehand. And
yep.
I'm like, yeah, I don't know what happened. I was just done with skiing down the hill and popped off and spun around and they weren't damaged with rocks really. So they were kind of like, all right, yeah. And then I see Susan that night at the competitors party and she's like, oh, hey, guy from the ski shop, what are you doing here? And then I came clean with her and told her that I was competing and I blew up her skis. And ever since then, we got a chuckle out of it. But yeah, I got my ass handed to me and I realized like, okay, I'm not really going to be a sponsored skier. I'm just going to enjoy skiing. And that's what I started focusing on, was just sending it to my ability and pushing it, which, was pretty good, I thought, and so much fun. So I just really kind of honed in on the sensations of like speeding and soaring through the air and like, how do I gain these feelings for myself to like fuel my passion and give me that jolt of electricity through my blood that's just like makes you feel so alive,
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Hest, because camping season is here, and if you're like me, the one thing that sucks about camping is the awful sleep you get every night. There's nothing worse than waking up in a fog and knowing you're going to be tired all weekend. Well, you can say goodbye to that, because Hest has reinvented the sleep system, and believe it or not, it's more comfortable than the Westin Heavenly bed I sleep on every night. Think 2 layers of temperature-regulating memory foam at its best, and it comes complete with a water-resistant base and integrated compression straps that make Hest the easy choice to take anywhere. Hest and I are so confident that you will love this mattress that everyone who buys one gets a 100-night money-back guarantee. You can't go wrong with it. To find out more about the best solution for sleep when you are car camping, truck camping, van lifing, truck conversion camping, well, you get it. Head on over to Hest.com. My next sponsor is Rollerblade, and they pretty much invented the sport of inline skating, and it's no surprise that they make the most comfortable, high-performance skates out there. If you're already a skater, check out the fit and finish of the 22 Rollerblade line. It will have you skating further and faster than ever before. If you're a new skater, Rollerblade has you covered with skates that are engineered to keep you comfortable, having fun, and most importantly, in control. To find out more about the 2022 offering, head on over to rollerblade.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, the brand famous for that iconic bottle that kept your grandfather's coffee hot and his water ice cold. Well, Stanley still has that bottle, but they also have everything you're going to need this summer to go camping. Nothing else matches the quality of Stanley, and like your grandpa's water bottle, the camping cookware will last you a lifetime and create the memories that Stanley is proud to be a part of. I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley gear. That's the best deal you're going to find anywhere. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase, when you check out, and you'll get the Powell Movement deal. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you get in the car and drive back up to Vail, you realize you're not going to be a sponsored skier. But what opens the door for you to get into the ski industry is like nerd type shit. You won a Powder Magazine essay writing contest. And what did you write about? How did you find out that you won? And what do you win?
Yeah, so I was in between my two waiting tables shifts, and I remember I'm like, oh man, I bet Powder Magazine's going to be in my mailbox today, because it had been like, it's about that time in the fall. And sure as shit, I ran home, checked it, there it was, bam, I was stoked. I sit down on the couch and I'm just like reading every word like I do, and there was like this fine print at the bottom of something. It's like, hey, Gravity Games contest, send us your craziest gravity induced experience and you can win a grand prize VIP trip to the Gravity Games in Mammoth. And I'm just like, oh, boom, Cresty Butte rope story. I had another crazy story from Cresty Butte where I went down there and jumped off this cliff. But as I did it, I got my ski hooked onto a rope. And so I'm like flying through the air, and then the rope gets taut, and then I like pendulum back into these cliffs. And then I'm like hanging upside down with the rope hooked onto my boot buckle, but there's like tons of jagged, drawn out rocks below me, and I'm fully worked. Like, I'm not hurt really, but I'm just like, holy shit, what just happened? And anyway, I wrote that off, and sure enough, I came home and there was a message on the answering machine, and it was like, hey, congratulations, you won the trip. And so like, I got out there and they just treated me like I was the VIP contest winner. It was epic. And so I got to meet Dave Reddick and Keith Carlson and Porter Fox and all these guys. And I was like, damn, these dudes can ski. And we were just shredding Mammoth and just having the time of my life. I couldn't believe it, because I'd been just scrapping as a waiter. And now all of a sudden I'm sitting down to the fancy dinner, ordering the steak and the beers, and like hanging with these dudes that were super cool and like amazing skiers. And I'm with fucking Powder Magazine, I was like, how did this happen, man? And at the end of the trip, they were like, hey, dude, you should come be a intern with us this summer. And I remember being like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I can't really like move to California to take a job that's not going to pay me anything. So I told him no thanks, but I'm back in Vail like a few weeks later. And Hardy's like, so dude, we're having a beer at Vendetta's. And he's like, hey dude, like, what's your plan this summer? And I was like, oh, I don't know, dude, wait tables, ride dirt bikes just like last summer, He's like, well, dude, what about that powder internship? And I was like, I can't afford to move there and not get paid. And he's like, dude, how much fun did you have hanging with those dudes? Like, that's your life, man. That's what you want. And right then I was just like, yes, you're right. And so I like called Keith Carlson real quick. I'm like, hey dude, you still got that internship? And he's like, yeah, come on out. And so it's like, meet us in Mammoth for Super Park. And I'm like, all right. And like, next thing you know, I'm like registering everybody for Super Park. And it was the second one for skiing that they had in May of 2000. And man, it was insane. All of a sudden there's like McConkey and Seth Morrison, and then all of these gibbers that I was just starting to get to know. And man, it was sick. And then then moved down to San Clemente and off to the races doing the internship.
And what I find funny here is there are a lot of people in the industry who post on social media almost regularly that you should not take a job where you're not getting paid. Like, no one should work for free or for gear because that doesn't pay the bills. And I don't subscribe to that school of thought. I believe that working for free is the path to a dream job for a lot of people. What are your thoughts on that?
Shit, yeah, man, it worked for me, and really what it boils down to is it's like, what do you want to do? And if you want to do it, then just do it. And it's going to work out, right? And yeah, maybe you have to work 3 months for free. That's what I did. But then when my internship was up, I was like, all right, dudes, I guess I got to leave now. They're like, no, wait a minute. You're not going anywhere. You can't leave. And so then they started feeding me all of this work with this insane, like, per word rate that I was getting paid. And like, all of a sudden I was like, damn, this is working out. And then it just rolled into one thing after the next. But yeah, do what you want to do. And all the other stuff will come, would be my advice.
And so you're doing what you want to do, and the magazine game on that point is just on fire. They have huge budgets, tons of opportunity to do cool shit. And when you think of the coolest things you did as an unpaid intern, was Super Park it, or was there anything better?
Super Park was probably the coolest thing because I was right at the start of it. And then right at the end of the internship, They're like, Gabe, why don't you come into our editorial meeting? And this was like a meeting they had every Wednesday that I was never invited to. And so they're just going through all of their like magazine business. And halfway through the meeting, they kind of nonchalantly said, oh, and then corporate gave us the approval to run the promotional motorhome tour this winter, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden my ears picked up. I'm like, what the fuck did he just say? Promotional motorhome tour? And then I think it was Keith. He's like, so I don't know. The problem is we got to find somebody to manage and run and operate that whole tour all winter long. And right then Porter raises his hand really awkwardly and he goes, I nominate Gabe. And I was just like, oh, fuck yeah. These guys just set me up with this meeting to tell me I got this new program to do this winter. And so that's when the shit really hit the fan, when I was like, wait a minute, this is insane. I became more stoked than ever up until that point, because I started to realize my path was now laid out before me, where I was going to be cruising around in the name of Powder Magazine and like buying everybody beers and skiing everywhere with all of the heads. And like, man, I was freaking out.
And what was that tour? So you have the RV, do you have a bunch of athletes with you and you're going place to place to place, just stoking people out?
Yeah, I mean, it was just me, but it would roll into that, you know, like first stop is I go up to Whistler, and that's when they had the big mountain comp up there. And so I meet the Swedes and all of the Canadians and those guys. And then I boogie down to Utah for the big mountain comp there. And then I start talking to the Swedes like Sverre Liljeqvist and Kai Zackerson and those guys. And they're like, yeah, we have to go to X Games in Mount Snow for skier cross. And I was like, no shit, I'm driving to X Games too. And so it was epic, dude. I just like picked those guys up at the Red Bull after party for the big mountain comp in Utah. And 5 of those Swedes piled into the motorhome. And then we just drove straight to Vermont. And what was going to be a drive solo, I just had the Swedes drive. I think I drove 2 hours of the whole 48-hour trip. You know, we had breakfast in Cleveland, and then like, I can't even remember. It was just get gas and go. And we crushed that whole drive in, I think, 44 hours. And bam, that was it. You know, it was like off and running. Then we would set up parties for charity and like host the Powder Video Awards and all these different bars all around the thing. And the tour evolved. You know, I kind of like kept pushing this and giving the publisher and the guys all of this ammo that they could use to sell the tour. So we got Volkswagen on board, and then that kind of guaranteed me like a whole nother salary and a couple years of doing the tour. And I just like kept stepping up whenever they'd have these opportunities, and it just kept snowballing. I did the bike magazine tour one summer, which was super cool. So I was just like on the road in this Volkswagen van for like 2 months in the summer, 2 months in the winter, but it seemed almost like the whole year, and the opportunities were endless to have the time of your life.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the best gig you could possibly have in the industry, with probably not that much responsibility other than the vehicle and showing up on time, but not many checks and balances in with corporate, because they're just trusting that you're out on the road getting your shit done, I would think. And it doesn't get any more fun than that. And you do that for 4 years of your life, which I think is just incredible. Were you pretty much over it when you took the Rossignol gig? Because after 4 years, it looks like you go to Rossi in more of a regional gig. Mm-hmm. How does that whole thing come together?
Rossi was sweet. I definitely wasn't over it, but I was in the process of like, dude, you want to hear a fucked up story? So what happened is I finished that last powder tour, and then I moved to California with this girl that I'd been dating for 3.5 years. I met her on the first powder tour. She was this cute ski patroller chick. You know, I meet her on the chairlift on the first powder tour, thinking I'm all stoked. And next thing you know, I'm like with this chick for a few years, and we moved to LA in May because I was like coming off another 100-day season. I was like, yeah, whatever, I'll move there if you want. And we're looking for work down there. And it was like, dude, slow going. I was like, what am I doing? I don't even know anybody down here. And like, our plan the next morning was to go to the Staples Center to go to a job fair to like try and find a job. And I was just like, what's going on? So I go to sleep that night, and I wake up in the morning and I turn my phone on, and like 5 seconds later it rings, and it's Jason Newell at Rossignol. And he's like, hey dude, I got this program put together. I want you to be the guy. And we're rolling out this huge program all around the country. You can pick your territory. Like, you know, you're going to make 28 grand a year. You're going to have like a 25 grand a year expense account. You're going to have a Rossi van full of all the new skis. You're going to stoke everyone out. And he's just like spitting out my dream job. I didn't even really hear the 28 grand a year part, or maybe I was even stoked on it at that point. So I hang up and she's like, what was that? And I was like, oh, I just got a job. And she's like, how much does it pay? And I'm like, 28 grand. And she's like, well, that's not enough for a family. And I was like, wait a minute. Whoa, we haven't even talked about having a family. Why are you tripping on me about I got to be providing for a family now? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, maybe we should just break up then. Or there was, I think, this whole other conversation. I don't know. But I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. So as I'm packing up my shit, I started to realize, like, wait a minute. She has this Native American dream book. And she's always referencing that. And so I remembered this crazy dream I had where I like had all of these busted up teeth in my mouth and I'm like spitting all of these shards of teeth into my hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like look in this Native American dream book and it says, if you have broken teeth, it means you have a reversal of fortune. And if you spit your teeth into your hand, it means there's a change in your personal relationships. And I was like, what the fuck? How did these ancient peoples know what happened in my brain with a job in the ski industry and this girlfriend? Dude, that's something, you know, I would love to talk to somebody more about is the knowledge that ancient peoples have and all of this stuff that is like spirit world type shit, but it happens and it's true and it's tangible.
So do you believe in horoscopes?
I don't know about that. Not necessarily, no.
Just checking, because that last thing that you said is kind of strange.
It was, and it is, but it happened, right? Like, I believe that these Native Americans interpret these dreams and that exact same thing happened in my life. Like, you know, and it was like, I don't know, the timing of it was all so bizarre. This all happened in the course of like 1 hour, you know, the dream, the phone call, me looking at that book afterwards. So that was sweet though. I took that job at Rossignol. I was out of there, man. And it was the best winter of my life. It seemed like my winters kept getting better because now, you know, I had more responsibility and I had more like ability to like bring people on as athletes and like hook people up. And it was fun, super fun.
But that one only lasts like 4 months, it seemed like. Was it just like one winter that you worked for Rossi and then then you see a job opening up at Smith and you know right away that they're a brand that you want to work with and you're like, I'm going to make these guys hire me?
Yeah, you know, the guy at Smith was Tad Kleiner and he's epic. And he was always the guy running the ski program. He kept telling me like even 2 years prior, hey, dude, I'm going to hire you for my job. I'm about to get this promotion. And when I do, I'm going to hire you. This was like 2 years prior. I was like, oh, that's epic. But then like the dude never retired and Tag never got the promotion. But then finally he did. And then Tag hit me up and he's like, dude, send me your resume. My job's open. And then I was like, oh, shit. And I went through this kind of big formal interview process with Smith. And I guess it was my job to lose. But I totally stomped the interview process. And next thing you know, in April, I was working for Smith.
Do you just pack up right away and move to Sun Valley?
I don't know. I finished out the winter with Rossignol, I think. And because I loved working there and that was the greatest. And I still love that brand. I ski on that stuff every day since then. But I finished out the winter with Rossignol and then I worked for Smith and then, moved up to Ketchum, Idaho and haven't looked back.
So it's 2005. You're the ski and outdoor promotions manager at Smith. And is this when you're given the keys to continuing their incredible athlete program?
Yeah, it was amazing. That was like the opportunity of a lifetime, you know, like Tag had established a pretty wicked team. I took over and I knew all of these athletes really well. Like I spent so much time hanging at Sage's place back even before Rossignol and hanging with all these guys in Utah. So then coming in and getting to work with him and Dav and, you know, Abma and Hjorlifson, I just got to meet soon thereafter. And Sarah Burke, I had known her forever. And same with C.R. Johnson. I had really good relationships with those guys for a long time through my days at Powder. So yeah, we had quite a crew going. And JT Holmes, he was a big part of it. I remember skiing with him on my birthday, like way before I worked for Smith. He was showing me around on a Powder day and like just good times all the way around with that crew. And that whole Smith vibe was just bonkers, man. We just had so much momentum and energy going and like so much fun just going to X Games, going everywhere, you know, and Tag was the coolest boss. He's like, I think you need to go up to Whistler and, you know, check in on the High North sponsorship. And I was like, aye, Captain.
Yeah. And the team was insane. But the cool thing that you did was the local sponsorships that you created. It's like you could go to the lineup at KT on a Powder day and all the best skiers at Palisades were rocking Smith. And you made that happen in every mountain town. And I'm sure that's spread out all over the country. How many people do you think you're flowing goggles to at the end of the day?
Oh, man, it was huge. We probably had 100 people on the grassroots team, which is what you're referring to. And then there was like about 100 people on my pro team that I managed. And then there was probably another like 20 or 30 OGs and other legends and rippers that you would send goggles to, and they would wear it. So like, it was massive, and we dedicated a huge budget to it. You know, granted, it's a lot easier to do that with goggles than it is with skis or outerwear. So we just kind of really connected with the community and figured out who all of these rippers and up and comers were and let them have it.
Yeah. So you have these A-list athletes and badasses that you flow goggles to. Did you ever flow product out to influencers or folks who may not be that good but still move the needle? Or were you more focused on having like the hometown heroes on the program?
Yeah, you had to be a ripper. Like, that was the thing. You know, you couldn't get the goggles if you were just like taking photos. You had to know what you were doing. At least that's how I tried to do it.
Yeah, and I think you did a good job of that. But you see in marketing today where there's people that can't even ski that well, but they have a huge following. I mean, there's people that ski well. I mean, no one's going to suck if they're getting free product. But compared to a pro level guy, they might not be even close to that same level, but they have a huge social media following and people give goggles or give stuff to people like that, where I really don't have that much of a problem with it because I know it does move the needle. But you're more of a purist, I feel like, coming from the Smith team that you built. And I was kind of curious to your perspective on that.
Well, you know, there wasn't social media back then, too. So, like, this whole influencer thing wasn't really a deal at all. It was like, are you a ripper that can represent on the hill or not? And that was kind of it. Because, like, I knew half the people I was sending stuff to that they weren't going to get photos published in the magazine or they weren't going to film a video part, but I knew that they were going to be throwing down every day on their local hill. And that was all I asked of them, you know?
Yeah, and people see that, and then they end up buying Smith. And I think at one point you guys had like 40% market share or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, for sure. We had it going on. It was a good golden era back then.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and while ski season is coming to a close, Elan Skis is still supporting the show because they know how important the history of this sport is. What's important to me is that you do your part by checking out Elan's site, looking at their products, and demoing a pair next season. Once you do try an Elan ski, you'll end up buying that pair as the quality and performance of Elan's products is unmatched. I'm sure you've started to see more and more Elan skis at your local hill, and the reason is because they are more fun and they're going to make you a better skier. To find out more about everything Elan and their skis, head on over to elanskis.com. Next up, it's Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. And Peter Glenn has not only been getting you out on your adventures for over 60 years via their retail storefronts, they also have a robust online business, and they always have a fun promotion going on Instagram. This week, Peter Glenn is teaming up with Hoka to give away a pair of the new Hoka Bondi 7s to 2 lucky winners. Enjoy the all-day comfort Hoka is known for, thanks to its famous early-stage meta rocker that smooths the transition from heel strike to toe-off. Entry in this contest is easy. First, go to Peter Glenn Sports on Instagram and follow Peter Glenn Sports and Hoka. Second, like the giveaway post from Hoka. Third, tag 2 friends in the comments. It's that easy. The giveaway ends on June 17th and the winner will be announced then. Good luck. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They've been brewing the best beer in the Pacific Northwest since 2006, and they've been banging the drum about drinking 10 Barrel outside ever since. But they don't just go outside and drink. They support athletes like skiers Kate Zelef and Lucas Walks and snowboarder Ben Ferguson, mountain biker Carson Storch, and many, many more. And they don't just pay these people. They give them beer and they create content around them for all of us to enjoy. If that's not enough, 10 Barrel's Clean Line Seltzer has the perfect bubble recipe and flavors, and their cocktails in a can pack a punch. I love them. To find out more about 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. One thing that I heard that you used to say about being a good team manager is that being a team manager is a part-time job. Can you elaborate on that?
I don't believe I ever said that.
All right. Well, I got that from someone and we won't even talk about that anymore.
I don't know. It seemed pretty full-time to me, man. I was like constantly, I was in the office every day here at Smith or wherever I'm working. And then on the hill and traveling and, you know, you go to X Games and you're putting in 18-hour days and you go out doing your thing. And I think it's full-time for sure.
No, okay. Someone had heard you say that quote back in the day, and I think they thought you said it because you could answer emails in the morning, go ski, and then answer emails in the afternoon or something like that. And when I was thinking like that, I would think with your title, with all the people that you're flowing product to, all the people that want product from you, your inbox must have been ridiculous. And you were one of the dudes that always emailed people back. So was it like you're getting 150 emails a day that you feel obligated to answer?
Yeah, totally. You know, because I'd answer them either like, hey, thanks for reaching out. I'm sorry we can't help you out. Have a great day. Bam. How long does that take to do that? Right. And then it lets someone know like, okay. Or the people that you do want to take care of, you always find time for. And I don't know, I'm a pretty fast typer, but I'd get to the office early, man. Like I get there early sometimes on a powder day and just do a bunch of donuts in the parking lot, let everyone know Super G was in the house. and then right as they're all walking into the office at 8:30 a.m., I'm heading out the door holding my helmet in my hand, wearing my ski boots already. And it's kind of like, yeah, see ya. I've already been here.
And for them, they've got to be stoked to know that their team manager is coming in before everybody else, and then he's getting time on the hill every day. It just means like you're the heart of that brand, I would think.
Yeah, it was cool. Like my title was ski and outdoor promotions. Not that anyone ever said anything, but if they did, I'd be like, hey, man, what's the first 3 titles on your business card? Like financial planner. Okay, you go financial planner. I'm going to go ski and outdoor and we'll call it good. But no, everybody was stoked. And Smith was super cool. So there was never that vibe. Like all of the ladies that didn't ski, they'd go hiking every day at lunch, and the dudes would go to the gym, or everybody go mountain biking, or like it was encouraged. It was even written into our employee handbook that the employee can get 3 2.5-hour lunch breaks per week as long as they stay on top of their stuff. And so I took full advantage of that and then some. And with a boss like Tag overseeing it all, I mean, that guy, he was stoked, and he was pushing the vibe harder than anybody,
Yeah, there he was. And when you think about athletes and the ones that you signed, who is the most important athlete you feel you signed to the Smith program?
Ooh, man, I don't know. Like Abma, Sage, all these guys were Tag had signed by the time I got there. I signed McIntosh. He was really important.
Yeah.
I signed Billy Poole to the team. He was really important to me.
Yep.
He was the first guy I brought on, actually, because I would go way back with him. I signed Bobby Brown. He might have been the guy. Same with David Weiss. But yeah, Bobby, he was cool. That was an interesting one. I just kind of like reached out to him before anybody else. And I was like, dude, I believe in you and I want to get you on Smith, and like, let's see where this goes. And he was just like, what? All right. And like, he hadn't done anything really. And then he just like sent it to the moon a couple, like directly thereafter. So that was pretty cool.
And then on the flip side of it, who was the most difficult person to cut?
Man, I don't know. I can't really remember cutting anybody. Like, I remember when I first got there, Kreitler was making a huge salary, and Tag was like, hey, dude, I'm going to deal with this. We got to like figure this out. So I didn't really cut Kreitler, I guess, but he kind of, for some reason, pops into mind because he was kind of like a legendary figure that I think he went to Zeal right after that, And normally what would happen is you would just like, as people's exposure and performance started to wane, so I would wane their paychecks. And it got to a point where I think everybody kind of understood, like, all right, yeah, I'm not,
This is the end.
Yeah, this is the end. And then at that point, it was always like, dude, whatever you need product wise, you got it, And I tried to always have a lot of respect for the legends and the OGs. And we never really just would like switch directions, right? We were confident in our decisions and the people that we had on the program. So it was like, you don't just all of a sudden cut someone, it's kind of like a natural progression downward, I guess you could say. It's what it seemed like a lot of the times.
Yeah, and I guess when you're a team manager and you're looking at exposure and what those guys are able to generate for the brand, and then you look at what yourself is doing, I mean, you were a pioneer of helmet cam footage before anybody was really doing it. So you could look to yourself as being like, I'm not a pro athlete, but I'm getting a lot of exposure for the brand and just these helmet cam edits I'm doing. And there's some athletes that aren't doing shit for the brand, and I'm doing more for it as an employee. Did you ever kind of think of it like that? As like you were making a difference with the helmet cam footage?
That was funny, man, putting that together, because what I would do is I would send it out once I create an edit. I think this was in 2008. I was like, fuck it, I'm not the greatest skier, but like I do some rad shit. And if I've got this helmet cam on, like nobody can see if I've got some whack ass form. I'm like charging cliffs and stomping them and speeding through trees, and that's cool footage. And so I'd put these edits out, and then I'd email them to the whole team, and I'd email them to like all my buds in the industry. And it was like nobody was really doing it then. And so I was trying to like also motivate my team indirectly, like, hey, look what I'm doing. You guys could do this too, And yeah, it was fun. It was super fun. And I had a lot of good times just crafting those edits and, figuring shit out. But I don't know. I don't really worry about it anymore, even though I feel like I'm still can create some rad footage. But, you just think about different stuff, I guess.
I'm sure it's easy to justify the travel budget spend on some of the things you do when you're coming back with great content. It's just like, hey, I'm on these trips because I'm delivering.
Yeah, it was never about that. It was like, I'm on this trip because I'm assisting the athletes. Really, it was so I could go shred some Powell. Like, I took full advantage of that situation and having Tag as my boss and, going up to Red Bull Cold Rush and like poaching the course while the heli's in the air and blowing out the landing. Like, that was freaking hilarious. Maybe now, not at the time, but oh man, I think all the athletes got a big kick out of it. Maybe not Big D, who was running the show, but there was some opportunities that I took advantage of and that I just was always kind of figuring out, like, how can I score some Powell? How can I just get involved, because it's just such a fun time and such a fun lifestyle. And a lot of these athletes and skiers were friends and they were just super rad humans. So it's like, that's who you wanted to be skiing with anyway.
So you have a dream job at Smith, and it's something that looks like you will never, ever leave unless Smith leaves Sun Valley. And in 2014-15, they announced that they're moving to Portland. When you hear it, like, what's your initial thought?
My initial thought was, shit, like, see you later. I don't think I ever really thought I was going to move to Portland. That's for sure. And they gave us like 80 days to make our decision. They were like real cool and transparent about the process once it went down. But there was no point really where I thought, oh yeah, that'll be fun. Like, we can move to Portland. I mean, shit, man, I live a mile away from the biggest chairlift in North America right now. And that's kind of what I told them in the meeting, where they were asking for our decision. They were telling us about the relocation package and the moving allowance and the new salary. And then I was like, tell me about the severance package, because I'm staying in the mountains, And that was it, dude. I was just like planting my flag and just keeping it real with myself, and I was in no position to like ditch my career at that point. But I also knew that like, this is where I wanted to be. And if I left here, then I'd just spend the whole rest of my life trying to get back to right where I am. And it just seemed like a real backwards process to subject myself. And I had a son and wife and son at that point, and probably another daughter on the way a couple of years later. So you'd think it would be a difficult decision, but it was really quite easy, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way you're going to move from Paradise to Portland.
Yeah.
And then the next steps for you are interesting. I mean, you were managing dog shows, and I guess the one big difference with dog shows is that you don't get super attached to the talent like you do with human talent, like the athletes that you had.
Mm-hmm.
And to bring this back to Smith and athletes, while you were there, you lost some incredible athletes and friends. I mean, C.R. Johnson, Sarah Burke, Billy Poole, which you just said was the first dude that you put on, and you knew him really, really well. And there have been more over the years. How do you deal with loss like that? Because we know we're going to see loss every year or every other year, and it's going to happen. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, man, those were some real tough times. And it seemed like it happened every other year. And, really the best way to deal with it would be to go to all of the people like that cared about that person and that were really tight with that person, and to experience all of that grief together and to experience it and like let it out, but to do it with everybody that really cared about that person. So I did that, with each person that passed away, and that helped a lot. But man, it was tough because they were such amazing people. And, ski skills aside, which they were like some of the best in the world, no doubt, just they each had their own special quality. And the problem is that there was more besides those three. Like, we were losing athletes all the time, and then when it wasn't a Smith guy, it was like McConkey or somebody else. And it was just like, what in the hell is going on here? It was tough. And the only way it gets better is through time, I think. So I don't know, but I'm super grateful. I spent so much time with each one of those people, with Billy, Sarah, and CR. And man, those are just the best of memories because they just were so positive and smiley and funny and just awesome. They made you feel so good. So you just remember that. And I'm so stoked I got to know them as well as I did.
Yeah. And does it change anything when there's a professional aspect to this as well? Like, are there loose ends that you have to tie up and like you have to deal with families and to add closure to the whole thing professionally?
Yeah, for sure. Like Sarah had just signed a huge 3-year contract with us like a few months earlier. So, the CFO at Smith calls me in and he's like, Gabe, so what are we going to do about her contract? And I was like, nothing. Like, let's just leave it. And we'll just send those monthly paychecks to Rory for the next 3 years. And that's what we'll do. So that's what we did. I think Rory appreciated that. it seemed like a good way for me to really do what Sarah wanted me to do, and it seemed like her foundation was getting tons of support. And, we created a goggle where we raised, I don't know how much, thousands of dollars for her foundation through her goggle and all of this stuff. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely loose ends you got to deal with, and a lot of just brand communication on once it happens and you're like in trauma mode from losing your friend. And then you have to figure out how you communicate this as a brand to, the industry or the world. And I don't know, then it sucks. I hate dealing with that stuff. But like I said, I just keep thinking of the smiles and all the good times. Like I was surfing with Sarah on the MSP East Coast movie tour and went to her wedding, and all these Portland photo shoots that we used to do back at Nemo back in the day, and X Games. Me and Rory were just up there. We were like her two folks up in the start gate at X Games. I was making sure her lenses were good, which they always were because she's wearing Smiths and those goggles are so good.
Yep.
And then Rory was always like, talking to her and giving her the vibes. And then she'd drop in, and me and Rory, we'd probably go sneak back behind the shed for a hot minute and come back out. And, so it was good times, man. We were so close with all of those folks.
Well, sorry I had to bring that up, but it's part of the game. And in the dog world, you don't have those relationships, but you also don't have skiing every day and interaction with so many rad people. And while you're always so super stoked on life, does that change a little bit when you're out of the snow business? Like, is there, I won't want to say depression, but is there like a downtime for Gabe?
Not then. Like the dog thing kind of was weird. I just jumped right from Smith right into that. And then I got a huge raise doing the dog, managing these big, large scale televised dog shows. And then that lasted for only about a year just because it's hard to work there. But I was still skiing every day, I was still living in Ketchum and still got a 100-day season in. But then when the dog show thing ended, then it was kind of like, oh shit, now I've got 2 kids and I don't have a job and I live in a ski town. Like, now what do I do? And, I just went to work at my buddy's ski shop for the first couple months, which was a trip, I was like, shit, man, here I was, this big marketing boss, and now I'm on the shop floor. But, it was cool. I was grateful for it. And I approached each day with the same stoke. And I knew what I was talking about with the product and talking shit to people and selling them stuff that they needed or didn't need. So I was really good at it. And I was working for my buddy. So that was cool, as opposed to working for some random guy.
Yep.
So yeah, I just did that. But then that only lasted a couple months because I just kind of started finding odd jobs. And at one point I had 4 or 5 jobs and just pulled it all together. And then I got linked up with Dakine, and that really kind of got me back to where I wanted to be.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like with Dakine, you get hired on in 2017, and there's no real, hey, you need to move here to be with us. You're able to stay in Ketchum and still do your Dakine job. It's got to be almost just as good as the Smith job with Dakine.
Yeah, it was great, and it was an awesome opportunity. And the way that it started out is I was a part-time contractor managing the bike program. And so I wasn't really an employee. And so it was kind of oh yeah, we got the bike guy that lives in Sun Valley. But then I'd say after about 3.5 years, I kind of kept working hard and doing great and worked my way into a promotion to take over the ski program as well. So now I do bike and ski there, which is awesome. That's right where I want to be. It's my 2 biggest passions, and it's where I have the most connections and friends. And, running this bike program at Smith forever, I got to just meet that whole industry and create all kinds of relationships and friendships there. And bringing that to Dakine is great all around.
Your title these days is the mountain manager, I believe, at Dakine. Is that correct?
Yeah, mountain marketing manager. Exactly.
So that puts you back in your happy place in both summer and winter. And I would think if I was going to ask you where you're going to be in 10 years, you'd be at Dakine because I got a fucking awesome job, which would be my guess.
Yeah, for sure. I think about it every day. It's when I wake up, it's your first thought is oh shit, I have to wake up. And then once you get going, your second thought is oh shit, I need to work all day. And then my third thought is oh yeah, I got all this sweet stuff that I get to work on. I'm very grateful and show up motivated every morning to, give it my all because it's all passion. I'm working with all of the greatest athletes still, and it's a much smaller team. So I'm way more focused, and it's a totally different job really than what I was doing at Smith, even though it's kind of the same ski and bike marketing. It's just more of a refined role. It's more creating as opposed to reacting. So yeah, I'm just eternally grateful for what I'm doing.
Nice. Well, now we're at the part in the podcast that I call inappropriate questions. And for you, I have 2 people asking inappropriate questions. The first question comes from a longtime Smith athlete and badass responsible for the 50 project, Cody Townsend. And then the second two questions comes from a Sun Valley local, a former U.S. ski teamer and ex-gamer who now spends his time managing children at home and clients in the backcountry. I'm talking about Zach Crist. So first, are you ready for question number 1 from Cody Townsend?
Yeah, bring it on.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so Gabe, I'm always curious about this. What was the minimum amount required of weed and mushrooms you had to do in order to get invited on any sort of the Smith film trips?
0, I guess. Is that the answer? You didn't have to do anything you didn't want to, but there were a couple times where we're doing these trips in the backcountry of Idaho, whether it's in the summer or the winter. Like one time actually, it was the last time I saw Sarah. We did a sunglass catalog shoot in June, and we had a bunch of athletes from all of our different sports, and we're camping and doing like a summer mountain sunglass photo shoot. And so, I was like, hey guys, we got these things here. And they were like, ooh, what about the photo shoot? And I'm like, well, you're going to have sunglasses on in every single photo we take of you. So they were all like, I'm game. And everyone just dove in. And man, you look at that sunglass catalog, there was some smiley motherfuckers in that one. Let me tell you, it was a great catalog, if you ask me.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, there's a part B to Cody's question that he's going to ask right now, too.
Subsequent question, why was I never invited?
Probably because he was on Von Zipper at the time. He was on Smith, and then he switched to Von Zipper, and then he realized that was a mistake. And of course, I was like, don't worry, Cody. You can come back. We love you. So there was that period of time. So I'm going to go with that as my answer.
All right, fair enough. Now we're going to go into the first question from Zach Crist.
Gabe, we spent a lot of great days out in the mountains together, and many of which I'll remember for a long time. I know that you're a big fan of getting into the flow state. Tell me about the role of THC and what that does for you in terms of achieving a higher level of consciousness as you partake in some of your recreational endeavors.
I got a theory on all of this, you see. So humans have evolved from ancient times to best operate when they're moving through nature. And they do this by walking or perhaps running, right? But just the whole moving through nature, that's where humans are at our best. That's what our bodies are designed to do. That's where our brains are thinking the best and the most aligned with everything. And so I think when you are skiing or mountain biking, you are moving through nature in a non-mechanized way. And yeah, you can make the case that bikes are mechanized, but nonetheless, you're coasting and gliding through nature. And it's like a higher level of walking, if you will. And so like our ancient ancestors, they couldn't comprehend speeding through a forest. Whereas that's what we as skiers and mountain bikers do now. And so I think that gives us kind of a biological sensation that really optimizes us and kind of allows us as humans to achieve our full potential. And then the weed thing is, I don't know, it just makes it more fun. Shit.
Perfect. We will jump into his final inappropriate question.
Some of us who play in the hills and try and balance that with work obligations have like a bit of a rule of thumb on how much does it have to snow in order to justify skipping work or meetings. I got to think for a guy like Super G, that standard is pretty low, like buckle deep, or where is it, Gabe? For a lot of people, they prioritize differently. It may just be nice supreme corduroy in a place like Sun Valley on any given morning for you just to say, I'm not working. Is there a marker for you? Tell us about that.
I'd say you just ski when you can. And there are times where you have meetings and work obligations and you stick to them and you do it. And then there's other times where you realize whether I get this done now or 2 hours from now doesn't really matter. So when you live 5 minutes away from the chairlift, it's kind of easy to just go find an hour for yourself. I can sit at my desk, get dressed, drive to the hill, take 2 full runs, come back to my computer in 1 hour. So it's like, how much time does any worker spend dicking around in a day? I think there's always time to make it happen. At least here there is, which is why I love it so much.
I mean, it just sounds like you have the ultimate life right there. And so that last one wasn't really inappropriate, so we need to get really inappropriate. And I heard a story about you back in the day from your Vail days that has to do with saran wrap. Can you tell us how saran wrap fit into your Vail days back then?
Oh, man. So it was one of those days I was waiting tables in the King's Club, and I was 22 years old, my first winter in Vail. I get off work and I'm taking the bus home. I go to the transportation center and I get on the bus, and on the bus is this girl that worked at the top of the lodge that I'd kind of seen. She served the coffees or whatever. So I started talking to her, and the next thing you know, she's like, "Hey, can you walk me home?" or something, like, as it was to her bus stop. And then I'm like, sure. And, I'm like underpaid, underlaid, overstoked ski bum,
Right, yeah.
I'm like, all right. And so then the next thing you know, we're going at it. And then, man, stuff starts to get serious. And I realized, like, wait a minute, I just met this chick on the bus. And so I run into the kitchen, full wood, rifling through all the drawers, find the thing of saran wrap, slap it over there, go to town. And I remember walking out of that. She was in Timber Ridge, which is it was like the employee housing in Vail. And,
Yeah.
And I'm like walking out of there, like, what just happened? Like, that was weird. Like, I didn't know how I felt about it. I didn't know if I should be stoked because I finally got laid that winter, or if I should be disappointed. I don't know. But anyway, that's how that one goes.
That is amazing, man. And that's Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast. And Gabe, I've always enjoyed seeing you on the road because I know you're going to make whatever we're doing a little bit better and more fun. Like, you're going to bring the stoke, and you're always going to get shit done and have fun doing it. I've never heard anyone say a bad word about you. People always just say how much shit you get done and how successful you are. And there's something to be said for that. And I thank you for your time.
Right on, Mike. Well, thank you. And yeah, I just think it's important to live your dreams and to live your life and realize that whatever you want out there, you can do it. For me, I'm living my dream, and I never thought this would be possible. So I know it is. If you just constantly work towards it and think about it and do the steps, you have faith, then bam, you get what you want.
So that was time with Gabe Schroder. And man, with this one, you can really tell how much he loves to ski. You can hear it in his voice. It's pure passion, and marketing professionals in the mountains don't get much better than Gabe. But one thing he and I discussed after the fact was the weak inappropriate questions that come up a lot on this show. While I was able to include a banger, when I started this segment, it was a Play Off My Powder magazine show sponsored, and the questions, they did suck sometimes. But when they did suck, that's where I used to step in and spin a normal question into a really inappropriate question. I have about 35 episodes on that old show on my computer, and they are so funny. So while Gabe and I were chatting, we both agreed that I need to get back in and making these questions better when they aren't that great. So that's the future of what Inappropriate Questions is going to be. And as a tribute to that, at some point this summer, I'm going to go into the archives and put together a mix of the best inappropriate content ever captured for a best of episode or two. So that was time with Super G, Gabe Schroder, and at this point, I want to ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on. Subscribe to the show there too, and please support the amazing sponsors who make this show happen. They are Elan Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Stanley, Rollerblade, Hest, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now I'm going to take you out with a Super G original. Have a great week, everyone.
Damn, these early season conditions, man, are tearing up my new skis.
Why are you on your new skis, fool?
Oh, man, that's all I got.
Dude, you gotta get some rock skis, man. You ski wherever you want, bust them up, no problem.
Rock skis?
Yeah, check this out. In any good quiver, you have a heap of ski. The DH, the twin tip, and the fat D. But there's one that's overlooked most definitely, and that's my old banged up, nasty rock ski. I take it on the mountain when it's too bony, or when I search for powder when it's too early. You know I ski all over and I ski stress-free, cause the sound of a bush shot, it don't bother me. A base weld on the ski, up pure luxury. Just a 5-minute wax and that's good for me. And my missing edges are so nasty, look like my bases got blasted by an M16. But when I skip over boulders or rip up the street, my rock skis perform so solidly, so solidly, so solidly. sidewalk, jibbers and keepers, stay out of my way.